Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto speculation video. This is going to be my speculation for Boruto 2 Blue Vortex Chapter 17, which I believe is coming out on the 19th for this month. So we're not actually that far away at all. In just a few days, I guess I'll be getting around to doing my review. But for now, we do have the preview page, and so I do want to do some speculation on the upcoming chapter. So from the official Naruto website, we did get the official preview page, and this is what it is. So it seems like they directly teased in chapter 16, Juro was probably going to visit the village because he likes the kind of culture there and he wants to sort of gain more knowledge from bookstores and stuff like that. So yeah, as they basically pointed out, if he happens to, for instance, go into a shop, leave him alone, just act like nothing bad is happening, and the idea being that, hey, if we don't do anything crazy, he's not going to attack, and if we don't anger him, we have a chance to actually win. And so we are directly seeing that happen. There's no dialogue here, but yeah, he is in a bookstore, checking out all the knowledge that he can get, which is just an interesting thing by itself, in that, is this just a general pursuit of knowledge, as in just he wants to learn as much about the world as possible now that he is an intelligent being, and especially him, because he's not based on anyone. There's no one stuck in a tree that is Jura. He is the tree, as far as we're aware. He is this specific kind of 10 tails as an individual, and he's now achieved intelligence, and he wants to make use of that. But again, to what goal overall? Because he still seems to be leaning down the idea that there is an ultimate drive to, of course, consume an Otsutsuki. He's now interested in the chakra fruit, but like what more than that is sort of the idea. And this interesting like pursuit of knowledge and trying to want all the other Divine Tree characters to also gain as much knowledge themselves is an interesting one. I'm going to guess it is just like anything he finds interesting, that there's not specific information that he's looking for. He just wants to know as much as possible. And depending on how they take this, it could be a quite interesting avenue for the character to go down, in terms of like it's the contrast between when it really comes down to it, he's going to, I guess, be doing some quite violent acts in terms of attacking people, wanting to kill them, wanting to consume people. But then in most of the other character-based things, he just seems to be this newly intelligent character who wants knowledge. And I'm wondering, is there any way to maybe talk him out of some of the other aspects that, hey, you're maybe leading yourself down a path where your life as an intelligent being will be cut short because we're going to try and defeat you because of what you ultimately want to do. Think about it logically, using your intelligence. Do you actually need to go through with all this crazy stuff? Can you not just exist in this world and kind of learn everything you possibly can? Do you need the power as well? And that could be an interesting kind of direction to go with him. But there's also just the weirdness surrounding, well, the series is still ultimately trying to get to Boruto Kawaki, maybe completely putting all these characters to the side. That like Otsutsuki still feels like the overall future of the franchise. So is he just a notable villain that we can defeat now? Or is he still in the background while Boruto Kawaki, as we know from the future, is going to happen? That's what's kind of interesting here, because I think they're building him well enough that people want there to be something big with him and not just a kind of big but ultimately throwaway villain. We'll see what happens with it overall. So, getting into chapter 16 and some of the big reveals that we got here, we obviously got quite a few technical stuff at the beginning, just with the explanation of Boruto's Flying Raijin Jutsu, that basically it's not the Flying Raijin Jutsu we know, but it effectively does the same thing, with the main point that they're making here being that Boruto is a genius because he effectively managed to create a jutsu that achieves the same effect, kind of on his own in a bit of a vacuum. He's different than Minato in that he uses kind of charged metal objects infused with his chakra to target, and they got into a little bit of the kind of technicalities about, oh, this is what all the symbols are on the metal objects that he uses. It's to kind of judge how far, distance, that sort of thing. I guess they're going to maybe do some interesting, maybe complicated stuff with his jutsu. Otherwise, I'm kind of like, why did you feel the need to explain that, like, in, like, great detail? But I guess it's just to keep us on the looking out for, like, when he plants metal objects on things, and looking out for those symbols, because he can use them to teleport wherever he kind of needs to. So that's interesting. Next point is that the chapter also explained to us another technicality, and that is what singularities are in relation to Kashinkoji's ability. So this helps to explain to us basically why both of these characters have chosen to effectively not tell other people about their knowledge of the future. That if it works in one way, why can't you just get people on your side by telling them about this stuff? But instead what they do is that they highlight that they're already telling us that the future is this sort of changeable thing that has a variety of different paths you can go down. Well, of course, telling people about this could happen in the future will cause them to probably change their actions, which probably shuts off specific avenues and then opens up a bunch of other avenues. And in terms of what Kashinkoji and Boruto are trying to do, which is to guide everyone down a path to one of those sort of like victorious scenarios where they ultimately come out on top and defeat the Divine Tree characters. Yeah, they want to make it so that there aren't a million possibilities, and so that there are a bunch, and that there's still enough open possibilities that they can achieve something, but not so many that it's just a random situation. And effectively what they end up kind of pointing out is that, hey, if we just told everyone about the future, it would effectively negate the knowledge we have about the future, because then all of a sudden everyone would act differently, and all the futures that we know about wouldn't happen because people would avoid them by just acting slightly differently. And then there's a bunch of new futures that we don't know about, and we kind of reset the situation over and over again. So they have to be a bit more careful and effectively utilize the idea that only a set group of people are going to be in this position of just properly sort of manipulating the use of the future, and that's why they're called singularities. They're kind of outside of fate to a certain degree, and so we get the idea. Boruto, Kashinkoji, and then they also add Ada in here as well, because she ends up listening in on this conversation, so she's aware of this now as well, so she is also a singularity. They probably need to explain things a little bit more about what specifically they mean here, because this seems to be this kind of thing where, okay, they're trying to keep it to as few people as possible knowing about it, but everyone who does know about it sort of closes off, to a certain degree, some of their own futures, because I guess Boruto, now that he knows about all this stuff, can't go down other paths that he would have went down if he didn't know what the future is. That's sort of the idea, and because he's actively using a lot of this, I guess it means he is separate from a lot of this stuff and can just, facilitate other futures being gone down. And that's what they kind of point out, is that everyone who knows about this is going to guide the world to hopefully a good outcome. So I thought that was pretty nice the way they explained it, and we'll see if there's any more technicalities to get into. I had this as a point further down, but of course there was a bit of drama in the last chapter between Sarada and Sumire in relation to Boruto and their feelings for him, as well as their own friendship. I'll talk about that more a little bit further down, though it could be a while before we properly address all that stuff, but we'll have to wait and see. The village still wants to capture Boruto, and I think we continue to still build up to the idea that Shikamaru is going to eventually suffer some consequences for either just the idea of he is the Hokage as things are beginning to go wrong in the village, or he might be outed as a quote-unquote traitor because, again, the switcheroo is still going on, but he's been able to kind of see through it and help Boruto. And if that gets discovered, there is a sense that, okay, what's actually going on here? Shikamaru's been very useful because he's the leader of the village, but he's on our side. But if he gets sort of removed from that position and potentially gets maybe put in prison or something like that, where he's kept out of the loop, suddenly Shikamaru kind of loses a lot of his influence and is in a bad situation himself and has sacrificed a lot. But they're definitely leading down that road overall. Ada knows what Shikamaru has been doing, and in a way, when they're having this conversation, he figures out that, oh, it must be Kashin Koji who's Boruto's working with, and then Koji basically reveals himself to Shikamaru, and then he basically brings Shikamaru in on this. I don't know if this fully makes Shikamaru now a singularity. I'm guessing this is a kind of like up in the air thing where they're choosing to be like, okay, we need to partially bring him up to speed, so this might change a few things, but we need to facilitate things going down this path because it's a big fight against Divine Tree characters. We need to make sure this one goes correctly is sort of the idea. So he wants Shikamaru to send Konohamaru, Sarada, and Mitsuki to the Land of Wind to deal with the potential threat of, initially in the chapter he says it's going to be Ryu, Matsuri, maybe both of them. And then also he says, don't let Himawari leave the village. Jura is interested in her. But if Jura goes into the village, because he sort of cares about it, he doesn't want to just wantonly destroy the village, he won't act out, basically. So basically warn everyone in the village. If Jura just shows up and he's just kind of walking around, looking around, don't engage him. Just treat him like a normal person in the village, because we can't anger him. If Jura gets truly angry, we will lose. We will not have a chance of winning. Now, I wonder what that means, because that is implying some sort of a thing where, like, the anger is going to make him more powerful, or some sort of idea maybe because he is based on nothing and he's just the Divine Tree, that if he gets angry, maybe he will turn into some sort of a kind of, you know, Ten Tails tree monster type thing, and that could be even more disastrous than dealing with the more intelligent side of things. And I'm guessing that might be the angle they go with him, is that when he's angered, I'm a Ten Tails, I need to consume something, the more kind of beast side almost of him comes out, whereas we're highlighting that actually as an intelligent being, he is pursuing knowledge, and there's this massive contrast with the character, and we need to keep him in this kind of human kind of form, effectively, where at least he's reasonable and somewhat kind of predictable, whereas if he's in the beast form, there's no reasoning with him whatsoever, and it's just going to be all about anger, destruction, consuming, maybe. So that's certainly an interesting one. And then at the end of the chapter, we get Konohamaru, Sarada, and Mitsuki arriving in the Land of Wind, where they meet up with Yodo and Araya, and they very quickly spot that it is actually the worst case scenario, Ryu and Matsuri. So, very interesting cliffhanger suggesting that this is a volume starting chapter 17. So all the way up to 20 is going to be the next volume. So because we left off with a setup, the idea should be that this should be an action-focused volume dealing with this conflict. It's just going to be all about, like, do we get to this immediately? Is there a lot of planning to be done? Or are we going to catch up with some of the other plots before we come back to this? But to address the preview page, again, what are we doing here? I'm guessing this is just going to be a quick 1-2 page, you know, while something else is going on, let's just quickly address where Jura is, because he is ultimately the main threat. They seem to be highlighting that Boruto needs Kawaki's help to be able to defeat Jura in particular. If Jura wasn't around, we absolutely have many chances at victory, but because Jura is in play, we have so many opportunities to lose this. So, that's kind of interesting that they're kind of keeping him always kind of in the spotlight. If he's in the village, it obviously gives the opportunity for other characters to interact with him, but I think based on what Kashin Koji said, no one is going to interact with him, especially when there is a mission going on with some of these other characters. And that was part of the point that was being made, was that, hey, if we engage the other Divine Tree characters with the bare minimum people required, it should keep Jura from interfering in those fights. And so I'm wondering, is that why they're highlighting him here? As in, okay, while this big fight maybe is in the starting points of happening, Jura's still just here chilling out. And we need to be keeping an eye on him to make sure he doesn't arrive on the scene to turn things in their favor overall. I'd be surprised if we got tons of dialogue with him necessarily. I kind of do think this is just going to be more of a fun reference of like, oh wow, they're actually doing that thing where he shows up at the village. This I feel they do need to come back to. I don't think you can have too many breaks between this, because again, there's a bit of a time kind of issue going on here where Kawaki needs to get stronger very quickly. So there's no reason this should be particularly delayed. So I think they probably need to get back around to this. Kawaki has to confront Amado to get his basically kind of limiters removed, get his power boost. Again, the description on this was quite interesting, where clearly Amado has boosted Kawaki's powers from a defensive point of view, but not offensively. So something is being kept back, and obviously we know that the reason he would want to protect Kawaki is because Kawaki is key to being able to bring his daughter Akebi back. So I'm wondering, in all of this, like, are we just going to do the boost immediately? Is Amado actually going to bring up the Akebi thing? And what is the timeline on this? And that, like, are we bringing her into play now? Is there going to be a deal here where I will do this for you if you right now do this for me? But then we don't actually know the full mechanics on how exactly the resurrection is going to happen. Will this put Kawaki at risk? And, you know, bringing up Amado's kind of motivations as well to a certain degree, and some of the mysteries surrounding him, that, hey, he apparently had contact with the Shibai Otsutsuki's body, the god Otsutsuki, to implant some of that into all the key Kara members, that he has touched, you know, a god's body effectively just before it was like discarded, basically. That makes him super unique and interesting. So is there something else we don't know, is sort of the idea that I have with Amado still. And then more or less the last thing is just addressing the big cliffhanger here of like, how are we going to do this action here? Feels like we should jump straight into action, but because I think most people's opinion on this fight is that it does seem a little bit imbalanced, that this group, while there's some good shinobis in play, we're against two Divine Tree characters who have already, you know, done quite well in their own fights. Like Matsuri obviously defeated like Gaara and the others. So what hope does this kind of slightly altered group have against two of them? What's going on? How do we make this work? Clearly the fact that Kashin Koji was relatively comfortable with, yeah, send them out here. If there's one or the other, or both of them, he feels that there are possibilities. He has seen futures where they've come out victorious, is I suppose the idea. Now, obviously, that doesn't necessarily mean that that has to be this group specifically kills both of these Divine Tree characters. It can be a situation where they defeat one and the other one maybe gets away, or the other one might leave immediately. Or just that we get out of this with no one kind of taking a defeat, but the fight has moved on to the next stage. I think that would be a little bit unsatisfying. So I do feel we're in a situation. Matsuri is not going to get taken out here, because I think she has to have her own separate fight later down the road where Inoshika Cho is involved, and we can more focus on specifically like Moegi, her team, Konohamaru, that dynamic. I think they'll use this for a bit of setup here, because again, Matsuri's target is Konohamaru and he's there, so they'll play on that. But something is going to have to happen to either, you know, take her out of this fight temporarily, or just we ultimately pair off and we lead to the defeat of Ryu but not Matsuri. I'm not really sure, but either way, we're not taking two of these out immediately. I do feel Ryu, though, is probably going to be used here as a bit of an example, as like, hey, let's actually defeat one of these things to show you it's possible, what the mechanics are behind properly defeating one of them, what the mechanics are behind restoring the person trapped in the tree, so in this case, Shinki. And then also we have to factor in that Gaara is involved in this situation as well. He is sealed by Shinki's jutsu, but Ryu also can undo that seal as well. So you have to keep in mind it's Konohamaru, Sarada, Mitsuki, Yodo, and Araya. So I would say with them I say Mitsuki is probably the character who it feels like his power level we know the most clearly in terms of what his skills actually are. We maybe haven't seen Sage Mode go all out in a full-on fight to see just how extreme it is, but I think we know at least what his abilities are roughly. Konohamaru, like, they seem to be going back and forth about, like, is he like the Kakashi of this series, and he's going to actually reveal himself to have, like, just be really, really good in fighting. He has to have a big fight eventually. Or is he a level below that? We don't really know. Either way, I think against Matsuri, he has to have a big showing. He should be the MVP in this kind of conflict against her. So I think they have to show him pretty well. Sarada is also, I think, a bit of an enigma because, again, they have really just refused to do anything with regards to addressing, like, the Mangekyo, what her skill level is at this point. There's definitely a bit of a character arc going on the Sumire side of things when it comes to, is she almost holding Boruto back when she's on the same battlefield as him because of the difference in level? So has she trained enough? Does she actually need to do some training? Or is it going to be a case for, I actually need to break out my big guns that are a little bit risky? Because we assume the way the Mangekyo works for her is that it should, if overused, it lead to blindness. That should still be in play for her, unless we do something kind of odd and different. So I'm wondering what the full scope of things is there. And then the two Sans Shinobi, like, I don't think we know the full scope of their powers, like, post, time skip for those two. Obviously, they were defeated before, but now they have a better sense for what they're going up against, and, combos of abilities. It can work in an interesting way, of course. And then especially if Gaara gets out and is in any way able to still fight, he could turn the tide of things as well if we are able to kind of bring him into play, of course. Because again, Ryu's target is Gaara, so at the very least they know he is probably going to head for where Gaara's prison is, whereas Matsuri is going to follow Konohamaru. So I'm guessing they could do a simple thing of, like, if they know that, Konohamaru can just lead her off, creating a situation where the whole rest of the team gets to, like, 4-on-1 fight Ryu. Maybe Gaara gets involved there. That's one way to do it, to make it a little bit more even, given that we assume Matsuri is not going to properly have a big fight just yet. But anyway, final one, I do want to just talk specifically about this. I addressed some of it a little bit just there. They're separated for now. Like, Sumire is not on this mission with Sarada, but there was a little bit of a thing where Sarada was asked, like, hey, are you thinking about a guy? And she's like, no, but she clearly is, in combination with what Sumire kind of said to her. So a lot of people will say that, oh, of course, they're doing the romance drama thing with the girls, really. But I also think they were doing a little bit of that, yeah. But also, I think they're doing character development for both characters. Sumire, because she doesn't feel fully like a main cast member, where if you watch the anime, you know what she's about. If you don't, if you haven't, there's a little bit of, like, what are we doing with her? I think they need to have a bit of an arc with Sumire to have her step up and kind of become a main cast member. I think this is part of why she says that thing to Sarada as she leaves, which is like, when will you stop, like, only thinking of me as the class rep? As in, they're not in the academy anymore. I'm not the class rep anymore. Like, as in, has our friendship evolved? Do you see me as actually being a close friend, as being part of that main group? or am I still just the class rep where there's a bit of a distance between the two of them? And I think that's what they're maybe going for with Sumire, as in like, is she one of the main members of the group or not? Because we don't know what she's about. Like, if she was to be involved in a big fight, what is she doing? Like, we don't know what she's really up to either. With Sarda, I think they're definitely having her sort of think about her own feelings for Boruto, in a sense for like, okay, you hugged him, that makes sense, but like, was there more to it than just seeing an old friend for the first time in a while? Like, she really feels like she has romantic feelings for Boruto, but doesn't want to address it super clearly, and it's creating a bit of a weird situation with Sumire, where Sumire has been very upfront about how she feels, and Sarda, not kind of secretly addressing her own feelings, is kind of doing stuff like hugging him like that in front of her, not thinking about her own feelings but not thinking about Sumire's. And again, how does that work with regards to her friendship with Sumire, that she maybe didn't think about her in that same way? And I think that's why you saw kind of a bit of a distracted Sarda, that she is thinking about this and like what the focus is, but I don't know how they're going to do this with the two characters like separated. It obviously feels like they need to talk again and maybe figure out a little bit on their own, but I do feel like both characters need to step up, because there was also, in the dialogue between the two of them, the discussion about basically Sarda wants to go and sort of fight next to Boruto, but Sumire is kind of more understanding of like, no, I think the reason he always kind of leaves basically when he turns up is that he knows he has to stay away from us to sort of protect us, but also like for himself. She gets that. Sarda doesn't quite. And she kind of points out in a subtle kind of way that, hey, you being there kind of almost puts him at risk, as in like, are you holding him back a little bit overall? Like, is he going to get hurt trying to protect you, whereas you think you're maybe going to save him, and that isn't maybe the great view on the situation right now? I think there's some interesting stuff going on here beyond just romance drama. So I think they're trying to do a little bit of kind of both of those things, because they also are kind of highlighting that like Ada overheard all of this. Ada is kind of thinking about kind of Sumire and Sumire's feelings about this, and you know, does Ada like Boruto as well, and how does that play into things? Not to mention, we still haven't properly addressed the whole idea of why were they not affected by the omnipotence. There's a lot going on here with all of these things. Are we going to get Sumire focus in this upcoming chapter? Maybe, but I do think there are other things that need to be focused on. Like, I would say this, and then the big action stuff, getting that started are probably the main things I want. And I'm assuming that this is going to be pretty minor. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are heading into chapter 17. What do you think is and isn't going to happen? And everything I said here. But that's for the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.